Bruce Pardo. On December 24, 2008, the Ortega family gathered at their home in Covina, California, for their annual Christmas Eve celebration. Around 11:30 in the evening, someone knocked at the door. An 8-year-old girl answered to find a man dressed as Santa Claus, carrying what appeared to be a wrapped gift. In reality, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, a 45-year-old electrical engineer, held a homemade flamethrower disguised as a present. The moment the door opened, Pardo shot the girl in the face and burst inside. Armed with 4 9mm handguns, he began firing indiscriminately at the 25 partygoers. Guests scattered in terror, some fleeing through windows and doors, others hiding wherever they could find shelter. Pardo activated a homemade device consisting of a 9-gallon pressurized tank that sprayed 91-octane racing fuel. While it was designed to act as a flamethrower, it actually functioned more as a high-pressure fuel dispenser that saturated the house, which then ignited via a pilot light or spark from his gunfire. The flames spread rapidly, engulfing the structure. 9 people died that night. His ex-wife, Sylvia Ortega Pardo, 43 years old, her parents Joseph and Alicia Ortega, ages 79 and 70, her siblings, and a nephew. 3 others suffered injuries as they escaped. The house burned so intensely that investigators later needed days to identify all the remains. When firefighters arrived at 11:46 in the evening, they discovered the bodies of those who had perished while attempting to flee. But who was Bruce Pardo? And what drove him to such lengths? Pardo had married Sylvia Ortega in 2006, but the relationship quickly deteriorated. Financial disagreements plagued their marriage from the start. Pardo refused to open joint bank accounts and concealed the existence of a child from a previous relationship. His secretive nature created constant tension. The marriage lasted barely 2 years before Sylvia filed for dissolution. The divorce became final just 1 week before the attack. The settlement required Pardo to pay $1,785 monthly in support, an amount he found burdensome. He complained to friends that Sylvia was taking him to the cleaners, expressing bitterness about the financial arrangements. His resentment deepened after he lost his job at ITT Electronic Systems in July 2008 for submitting fraudulent expenses. Without steady income, the monthly payments became impossible to maintain. Evidence later revealed that Pardo had planned the attack for at least 6 months. Investigators found he had mapped escape routes to Mexico and gathered materials for his weapons. The Santa costume served a calculated purpose, allowing him to approach the house without raising suspicion during a holiday gathering. He even wrapped the flamethrower to disguise it as a Christmas gift. While Pardo was spraying the fuel, the vapor cloud ignited prematurely, causing an explosion that melted the Santa suit to his body and inflicted 2nd- and 3rd-degree burns over a large portion of his torso and arms. Instead of fleeing to Mexico as planned, he drove to his brother's home in Sylmar. There, still wearing parts of the melted Santa suit, he took his own life with a gunshot. His brother discovered the body the following morning. Among Pardo's possessions, investigators found $13,000 in cash, airline tickets to Canada, and a detailed plan for escape. The Covina community mourned the loss of an entire family branch. Survivors described the horror of watching loved ones perish, unable to help as flames consumed the house. The investigation revealed no trial would occur due to Pardo's death. While financial disputes drove that Christmas Eve horror, the next case would center on betrayal of a different kind. Chris Watts. In August 2018, residents of Frederick, Colorado, followed a missing person case that would soon evolve into something far more sinister. Shanann Watts, 34 years old and pregnant with her 3rd child, vanished along with her 2 daughters. Her husband Chris reported them missing on August 13th, appearing in media interviews with what seemed like genuine concern. But investigators sensed something didn't align in his statements. What had really happened in the Watts household? The timeline began in the early morning hours of August 13th. Shanann Watts was dropped off by her friend, Nicole Atkinson, and entered her home at 1:48 a.m. on August 13th. The neighbor's surveillance camera, belonging to Nate Trinastich, later proved crucial by showing Chris backing his truck into the driveway. But it did not capture Shanann entering. It only showed Chris's movements later that morning. Her friend dropped her off after the flight, and she entered her house expecting to reunite with her family. What she didn't know was that her husband had already decided her fate. Chris Watts, 33 years old, strangled Shanann in their bedroom after she confronted him about an affair. The argument escalated quickly. After taking her life, he then went to his daughter's rooms. He initially attempted to harm them, but they survived. Later, he suffocated both Bella and Celeste at the oil field where he worked. The premeditation became clear as investigators pieced together his actions. How did investigators uncover the truth behind his disappearance report? Watts loaded all 3 bodies into his truck, an action caught on surveillance footage from a neighbor's security system. He drove to an oil site operated by Anadarko Petroleum, where he worked as an operator. There, he buried Shanann in a shallow grave and disposed of his daughter's bodies in separate oil tanks. The crude oil would eventually complicate the recovery and identification process. When Shanann's friend could not reach her later that day, she contacted police. Officers arrived at the Watts home and found Shanann's phone, purse, and medication still inside. Her car remained in the garage. Nothing suggested she had left voluntarily with her daughters. Chris appeared cooperative during initial questioning, but his behavior struck investigators as unusual. He seemed more concerned about media attention than about his missing family. Chris Watts failed a polygraph administered by CBI agent Tammy Lee on August 15th, scoring a significant deception indicator of -18, which led to his first partial confession that same night. During questioning, he first claimed that Shanann had harmed the children after he asked for separation, forcing him to react. This version quickly fell apart under scrutiny. On August 16th, he confessed to taking all 3 lives and led authorities to their bodies. The recovery operation proved challenging. Shanann's body was found in the shallow grave, still wearing her wedding ring. The daughters' remains were extracted from the oil tanks with specialized equipment. Forensic examination revealed the extent of their suffering. But what motivated a seemingly devoted father to commit such acts? Investigation into his background revealed a hidden life. Chris Watts had begun an affair with a co-worker named Nicole Kessinger weeks before. He told Kessinger his marriage was ending. Text messages showed him searching for apartments. He had even given Shanann OxyContin, attempting to end her pregnancy, which failed. Financial pressures also played a role. The family faced bankruptcy and mounting debt. Shanann's business ventures hadn't generated needed income. Chris saw his affair as an escape, a fresh start unencumbered by responsibilities. Rather than pursue separation, he chose permanent elimination. Letters Watts wrote from prison revealed he had planned the act for weeks, contradicting his initial claims. He researched methods and calculated timing. The premeditation extended to his television interviews, where he pleaded for his family's return while knowing where their bodies lay. Chris Watts pleaded guilty on November 6, 2018, avoiding trial. He received multiple life sentences without possibility of parole, plus 84 years. He currently serves his sentence at Dodge Correctional Institution. In recent years, he has written letters claiming forgiveness. But deception can take many forms, and the next case would reveal a family's darkest secrets hidden behind the walls of what seemed like paradise. Anthony Todd. In December 2019, residents of Celebration, Florida, a planned community near Walt Disney World, believed they lived in an idyllic neighborhood. The town's design emphasized family values and safety. The Todd family appeared to embody these ideals, with Anthony running a successful physical therapy practice while his wife Megan homeschooled their 3 children. But beneath this perfect image, financial fraud and disturbing beliefs festered. What really happened in their seemingly perfect home? The family's last confirmed sighting occurred in late December 2019. Neighbors noticed they hadn't seen the Todds during the holiday season, unusual for such an active family. When Anthony Todd's physical therapy clinic in Connecticut began receiving complaints about fraudulent insurance billing, federal investigators started looking for him. Anthony Todd's physical therapy practice, Family Physical Therapy in Connecticut, was under investigation for defrauding Medicaid and private insurers of over $130,000 through a shell billing scheme that had been active for several years. On January 13, 2020, federal agents and local police conducted a welfare check at the Todd home. When Anthony answered the door, officers immediately sensed something wrong. The house smelled of decomposition. Inside, they discovered the bodies of his wife Megan, 42 years old, sons Alec and Tyler, daughter Zoe, and even the family dog Breezy. The bodies had been there for weeks, left to decay as Anthony remained in the house. How could someone live with such horror for so long? Forensic examination revealed that Megan and the children died from a combination of stabbing and suffocation. Investigators found Benadryl in their systems, suggesting they had been sedated before the attack. The positioning of the bodies showed Zoe had been placed under Megan, as if Anthony had tried to create some tableau. Despite the decomposition, toxicological reports and electronic data confirmed the family died in mid-December 2019, meaning Anthony lived with the remains for roughly 3 weeks before his arrest on January 13, 2020. Anthony Todd initially told investigators a shifting series of explanations. First, he claimed Megan had harmed the children before harming herself, and he had tried to save them. This story changed multiple times during questioning. Eventually, he described beliefs about an approaching apocalypse and said the family had agreed to a pact. His statements grew increasingly incoherent as investigators pressed for details. The investigation into Anthony's background revealed concerning history. His father had hired a hitman to attempt ending his wife's life in 1980. Anthony, a teenager then, witnessed the attack. This shaped his psychological development. Evidence of his insurance fraud scheme showed systematic deception over years. He had billed insurance companies for physical therapy sessions that never occurred, fabricated patient records, and used his practice to generate illegal income. When the scheme began unraveling in late 2019, he faced financial ruin and potential prosecution. The pressure appeared to trigger his final actions. During trial proceedings, prosecutors characterized Anthony as a destroyer of worlds, referencing his complete annihilation of his family. They presented evidence of premeditation, including purchases of Benadryl. The defense portrayed him as broken by stress and delusional thinking, but the jury rejected these arguments. In April 2022, Anthony Todd was convicted. He received life sentences without possibility of parole, plus 1 year for animal cruelty. He currently serves his sentence at Santa Rosa Correctional Institution in Florida. From suburban Florida to Australia's urban landscape, darkness knows no geographical boundaries. Anthony Robert Harvey. In September 2018, Perth, Australia, witnessed a tragedy that would dominate headlines and raise questions about recognition of warning signs. Anthony Robert Harvey, 24 years old, eliminated his wife Mara, their daughters Charlotte, twins Alice and Beatrix, and his mother-in-law Beverly over the course of several hours in their Bedford home. The methodical nature of the acts and his behavior afterward shocked investigators. What could drive someone so young to such depths? The incident began on September 3rd, 2018, when Harvey used blunt objects and blades to take his family's lives. The attack occurred throughout the house as he moved from room to room. Rather than flee or report what happened, Harvey remained in the house with the bodies for 5 days. During this time, he photographed the scene, an act that disturbed investigators and suggested a complete detachment from normal emotional response. How did authorities finally discover what had happened? On September 8th, Harvey drove to visit his father. During that meeting, he confessed to what he had done, and his father immediately contacted police. Officers rushed to the Bedford residence and found the bodies arranged throughout the home. The scene indicated Harvey had made no attempt to conceal his actions or dispose of evidence. He appeared almost relieved to finally share what had occurred. The forensic examination revealed the victims died from blunt force trauma and stabbing. The injuries suggested sustained attacks. Investigators noted some victims lacked defensive wounds, indicating they may have been attacked while sleeping. The presence of his mother-in-law suggested she had been visiting when she witnessed the acts. During police interviews, Harvey provided disturbing explanations. He spoke of embracing darkness and described planned elimination. His statements lacked remorse. Psychologists found complex mental health issues, though he was deemed fit to stand trial. The investigation revealed limited warning signs. He had no significant criminal history or documented mental health crises. Friends and family described him as quiet but not threatening. His relationship with Mara appeared stable to outsiders. The sudden eruption of such behavior puzzled those who knew him. In July 2019, Harvey pleaded guilty to all charges. He received life imprisonment with notation that he should never be released. He showed little emotion during sentencing. While that case unfolded over hours, the next tragedy developed across nearly 2 decades of deception. John List. In November 1971, the List family lived in a 19-room mansion in Westfield, New Jersey. From the outside, they appeared successful and devout. John Emil List worked as an accountant, attended church regularly with his family, and maintained the image of a responsible father and husband. But behind the facade, financial disaster loomed, and obsessive thoughts consumed him. What happened when that facade finally cracked? On November 9, 1971, John List methodically took the lives of his wife Helen, mother Alma, and 3 children throughout their home. He used a handgun, approaching each family member separately. His mother was in her 3rd-floor apartment. His daughter returned from school and was shot in the kitchen. His sons came home later and met the same fate. List placed the bodies of his wife and children on sleeping bags in the ballroom, but his mother's body remained in her 3rd-floor apartment because she was too heavy for him to move downstairs. He also left the house's intercom system turned on so the classical music, specifically 24-hour religious broadcasts, would play throughout the mansion. He wrote letters to his pastor explaining his actions as necessary for their salvation. In his theology, he believed they were better off than facing poverty or moral corruption. List spent the rest of that day covering his tracks. He stopped mail delivery, canceled utilities, and notified schools of family travel. He arranged the scene to buy maximum time before discovery. That evening, he drove to the airport, abandoned his car, and disappeared. How did someone vanish so completely in the modern era? The bodies remained undiscovered for nearly a month. Neighbors noticed lights on and music playing, but assumed the family was traveling as List had indicated. When police finally entered on December 7, 1971, they found the scene exactly as List had left it. The deliberate arrangement of bodies and religious elements shocked investigators. The systematic deception suggested careful planning rather than a spontaneous breakdown. Investigation revealed List's financial desperation. He had lost his job months earlier, but continued leaving for work each day. The family's accounts were depleted, and the mansion faced foreclosure. His mother's medical bills added to the burden. Rather than admit failure, List chose elimination. For 18 years, List evaded capture. He moved to Denver, adopted the identity Bob Clark, and remarried without revealing his past. He found work as an accountant and lived an unremarkable suburban life. In 1989, the television program America's Most Wanted featured List's case. An age-progressed forensic bust created by sculptor Frank Bender proved remarkably accurate. The neighbor, Wanda Flannery, lived in Midlothian, Virginia, a suburb of Richmond, and recognized the age-progressed bust as her former neighbor, Bob Clark, who had moved to Denver, leading to his arrest. During trial proceedings, List maintained that religious devotion motivated his actions. He claimed his wife was becoming less Christian. His daughters showed signs of moral decline, and poverty would corrupt his family's souls. His defense attempted to argue diminished capacity based on obsessive-compulsive disorder and religious delusion. The jury rejected this reasoning. List was convicted on 5 counts and received 5 consecutive life sentences. In a 2002 interview, he expressed regret but maintained his theological justification. He passed away in 2008 at age 82. Deception takes many forms, and sometimes the most calculating criminals hide behind charm and normalcy. Scott Peterson. In December 2002, Modesto, California, became the center of national attention when Laci Peterson, 27 years old and 8 months pregnant, disappeared. Her husband Scott reported her missing on Christmas Eve, claiming he had last seen her when he left for a fishing trip that morning. As investigators examined his story, inconsistencies emerged that would ultimately unravel his carefully constructed alibi. What really happened on that Christmas Eve morning? Scott Peterson told police that he left home around 9:30 in the morning to fish at the Berkeley Marina, 90 miles from their Modesto home. When he returned that evening, he claimed to find their dog wandering the neighborhood with its leash still attached and Laci gone. Her purse, keys, and phone remained in the house. Nothing suggested she had left voluntarily, especially considering her advanced pregnancy and the holiday preparations underway. The investigation quickly intensified as media coverage exploded. Scott appeared in press conferences, appealing for information about Laci's whereabouts. His demeanor struck many observers as oddly calm, lacking the expected emotional distress of a husband whose pregnant wife had vanished. He participated in searches and distributed flyers, maintaining his role as concerned spouse. But investigators discovered troubling information. Scott had been having an affair with a massage therapist named Amber Frey. He had told Frey he was single and had never mentioned his marriage or impending fatherhood. Phone records showed he had contacted Frey on Christmas Eve while supposedly searching for his wife. When Frey learned about Laci's disappearance, she contacted police and agreed to record subsequent conversations with Scott. The recordings revealed Scott's continued deception. He maintained to Frey that he was traveling in Europe when he was actually in Modesto, dealing with the investigation. His lies compounded as he tried to manage both his affair and the missing person case simultaneously. The recordings would become crucial evidence at trial. The remains of Laci Peterson's unborn son, Connor, were found at Richmond's Point Isabel on April 13, 2003. And Laci's torso was discovered the following day, April 14th, 1 mile away at the shoreline of the Berkeley Dog Park. The first was a male fetus, the second an adult female torso. Forensic examination confirmed they were Laci and her unborn son, whom the couple had planned to name Connor. The location was significant because it sat near where Scott claimed to have been fishing on the day of Laci's disappearance. Investigators had theorized early in the case that if Scott was involved, the Berkeley Marina fishing trip might have been when he disposed of Laci's body. The discovery of remains near that location supported this theory. DNA testing confirmed the identities, transforming the case from missing persons to homicide. Peterson was arrested in La Jolla, California. He had dyed his hair and goatee a light blonde, claiming it was due to chlorine from a pool, and had his brother's driver's license and $15,000 in cash. His appearance and possessions suggested flight, contradicting any innocent explanation for his destination. He claimed he was golfing, but the evidence pointed to escape planning. The trial began in June 2004. Prosecutors presented circumstantial evidence building a timeline. They showed Scott had researched ocean currents in San Francisco Bay, purchased a boat weeks before Lacey's disappearance, and told associates he planned to fish at the marina, despite never having fished there before. His boat contained a homemade concrete anchor, and a single strand of Lassie's hair was found on pliers inside. Phone records showed Scott's movements on December 24th contradicted his stated timeline. Amber Frey's testimony and recorded calls demonstrated his capacity for sustained deception. The prosecution argued he wanted freedom without the burden of family responsibilities. The defense contended police had rushed to judgment. They suggested Lacey might have been taken during her morning walk, though they provided no evidence. They challenged the forensic evidence and argued the case had gaps. The jury deliberated for 7 days. On November 12, 2004, the jury convicted Scott Peterson on 2 counts. First degree for Lassie, second degree for Connor. The distinction reflected their finding that Lacey's end was premeditated, while Connor's resulted from the attack on his mother. In March 2005, the judge formally sentenced Peterson, with the jury recommending capital punishment. In August 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned the punishment phase due to jury selection issues, though the conviction stood. Peterson was sentenced to life without parole. He has maintained his innocence throughout incarceration. In 2025, Peterson continues pursuing appeals, though legal experts note his prospects remain minimal. He currently serves his sentence at Mule Creek State Prison. If you've made it this far and enjoy deep dives into the most shocking criminal cases, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to press the bell icon. Some tragedies unfold with calculated precision, while others erupt in moments of rage. Rowan Baxter. In February 2020, Brisbane, Australia, witnessed an act that would spark nationwide discussions about recognizing warning signs in relationships. Hannah Clark, 31 years old, was driving her 3 children to school when her estranged husband ambushed them. The morning routine that thousands of families perform daily became the setting for unimaginable horror. What had driven their relationship to this breaking point? Hannah had left Rowan Charles Baxter, her husband of 11 years, in December 2019. She had taken their children and moved to her parents' home, seeking safety from what she described as controlling behavior. Rowan, a former professional rugby player, struggled to accept the separation. Friends later told investigators he became increasingly fixated on reconciliation, refusing to acknowledge that the marriage had ended. On the morning of February 19, 2020, Hannah strapped her children into her car and began the drive to school. Rowan had hidden in the vehicle, waiting. As Hannah drove through the suburb of Camp Hill, he emerged and doused the car's interior with petrol. Before anyone could react, he ignited the fuel. The car burst into flames immediately. Hannah managed to escape the vehicle, her body severely burned. Witnesses rushed to help, finding her on the street crying out about her children, still trapped inside. Rowan had used a knife during the attack, adding to the horror of the scene. Emergency services arrived within minutes, but the intensity of the fire had already sealed the fate of those inside. Hannah died from her injuries later that day in the hospital. Her children had perished in the fire. Rowan took his own life at the scene, using the same knife he had wielded during the attack. The entire incident lasted only minutes, but left a community devastated and searching for answers. Investigation revealed a pattern of concerning behavior. Hannah had reported Rowan's controlling actions to police multiple times. She described how he monitored her movements, controlled finances, and isolated her from friends and family. He had used their gym business to maintain power over her daily activities. After she left, he continued tracking her location and making unexpected appearances. Text messages recovered from Hannah's phone showed the escalating tension. Rowan alternated between pleading for reconciliation and making veiled threats. He focused intensely on custody arrangements, using access to the children as leverage. Hannah confided to friends that she feared what he might do, but hoped the legal system would protect her and the children. A 2022 to 2024 coronial inquest, led by Magistrate Jane Bentley, found that while individual officers failed to recognize the lethality of Rowan's behavior, the primary failure was a lack of legislation regarding coercive control. This directly led to Queensland criminalizing coercive control in early 2024, with the law coming into full effect by 2025. Further revelations showed senior Queensland police defended detectives who made inappropriate comments, including suggestions Hannah bore some responsibility. These findings prompted calls for systemic changes in how authorities respond to separation-related threats. Rowan's background as a rugby player gave him community status that may have influenced perceptions. His cousin spoke about his misogynistic views and sense of ownership over Hannah. Friends noted he couldn't accept losing control. The gym they ran became a symbol of power imbalance. No trial occurred due to Rowan's self-inflicted end. The inquest focused instead on systemic failures and recommendations for preventing similar tragedies. Hannah's parents became advocates for better recognition of coercive control patterns and improved police response protocols. The case remained prominent in Australian discussions about separation-related harm throughout 2025. While that case exposed failures in protective systems, the next revealed how danger can hide in plain sight. Damien Bendel. In September 2021, the small English town of Killamarsh became the site of a tragedy that would raise questions about risk assessment in releasing offenders. Damien Bendel, 31 years old, took the lives of his partner Terry Harris, who was pregnant, her 2 children, and their friend who was staying overnight. The attack occurred in their home during what should have been an ordinary evening. How had someone with his history been placed in this situation? On September 19, 2021, Bendel used a claw hammer to attack everyone in the house. He moved through the residence methodically, targeting each person. The attack's nature suggested rage rather than calculation, though the sequence showed deliberate movement between rooms. Forensic examination later revealed the extent of the horror that unfolded that night. Bendel also committed an additional serious offense against one victim, adding another layer of depravity to an already incomprehensible act. The discovery of this would shock investigators and intensify public outcry about how he had been released into the community. The next morning, Bendel contacted police and confessed to what he had done. Officers arrived at the Killamarsh home to find the scene he described. The confession was straightforward and devoid of emotion, according to the officers who took his statement. He provided details that only someone present could have known. Investigation into Bendel's background revealed numerous red flags. He had previous convictions and had been released from prison only months before. His supervision requirements were minimal, despite his history. A 2023 Chief Inspector of Probation report revealed the assessment was wholly inadequate. A probation officer had incorrectly categorized Bendel as low risk to partners and children because they failed to check his violent criminal history in prison, a blunder described as systemic failure by the Justice Secretary. Questions emerged about how thoroughly authorities had vetted Bendel before he moved in with Terry. The risk assessment appeared to have missed concerning indicators. Terry had not been fully informed about his criminal past. She believed he deserved support in building a new life. Details emerged that substances may have played a role that night, though this did not explain the calculated nature of moving through the house. His state of mind remained under investigation, though no psychiatric defense was mounted. The presence of a sleepover guest added to the tragedy's senselessness. The friend had been invited for what should have been a normal social occasion. Instead, they became an additional victim in Bendel's rampage. The friend's parents spoke of their devastation and the impossibility of understanding why their child had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Bendel pleaded guilty to all charges in court. Avoiding trial, he received a whole life order, meaning he will never be eligible for release. The judge's remarks emphasized the particular depravity of targeting people in their own home, including those who had offered him a place to stay. Following a violent assault by another inmate in 2024, Bendel was moved from HMP Franklin to a high-security unit at HMP Wakefield, where he remains under 24-hour watch as of early 2026. Trust can be misplaced in ways that seem incomprehensible, as the next case would demonstrate. Jennifer and Sarah Hart. In March 2018, a vehicle containing an entire family plunged off a cliff in Mendocino County, California. The SUV belonged to Jennifer and Sarah Hart, who had adopted 6 children. At first, the crash appeared to be a tragic accident. But as investigators examined the circumstances, evidence pointed towards something far more sinister. What had really happened on that California highway? On March 26, 2018, the Hart family's GMC Yukon went over a cliff at a scenic pullout along Highway 1. The vehicle plummeted approximately 100 feet onto rocks below. When emergency responders reached the scene, they found the bodies of Jennifer, Sarah, and 3 of their children. 3 other children were initially unaccounted for, sparking a search operation. The crash scene showed peculiar characteristics. Investigators noted the lack of skid marks or braking signs. The vehicle appeared to have been driven straight off edge. These details raised suspicions, but the full picture would emerge as investigators examined the family's recent history. Days before the crash, Child Protective Services had attempted to contact the Harts regarding reports from neighbors. The neighbors had described concerning situations involving the children. When CPS workers visited the home, no one answered, despite evidence people were inside. The family appeared to be avoiding contact with authorities. Toxicology reports revealed Jennifer Hart had Benadryl in her system at the time of the crash. The children also tested positive for the substance, suggesting they had been given medication before the journey. This finding supported the theory that the crash was intentional rather than accidental. Analysis of the vehicle's computer systems showed the SUV had been stopped at the pullout. The driver then accelerated straight toward the cliff edge. This data eliminated any possibility of accidental departure from the roadway. Someone had deliberately driven the family over the cliff. The search for the 3 missing children continued for weeks. Eventually, their remains were recovered from the ocean, confirming that all 6 children had perished in the incident. The recovery efforts were complicated by currents and the rugged coastline. Investigation into the Hart's background revealed a troubling pattern. They had moved multiple times, often after child welfare concerns were raised. Friends noted increasing isolation from relatives. The couple presented a happy image on social media, posting photos of trips and experiences. However, teachers and neighbors at various locations had reported concerns over the years. Some children appeared to be unusually small for their ages. There were questions about educational adequacy and socialization. Each time serious investigations began, the family would relocate to a new state, effectively resetting any developing concerns. Sarah's deleted Google searches, recovered by forensic teams, showed she had searched for How easily can I get a lethal dose of Benadryl and his death by drowning painful in the days before the crash, proving the act was a calculated murder-suicide. These messages provided insight into the stress the couple faced, though they could not justify what followed. The crash investigation concluded that Jennifer Hart had deliberately driven the family off the cliff, likely with Sarah's knowledge or participation. The deaths were ruled as homicide and suicide, though the precise dynamics between the two women remained unclear. No trial occurred as both were deceased. The case prompted discussions about monitoring of homeschooled children and cross-state information sharing regarding child welfare concerns. The Harts had exploited gaps in systems designed to protect vulnerable children. Their ability to repeatedly relocate when scrutiny increased highlighted weaknesses in coordination between different jurisdictions. Relatives of the children spoke about their devastation and frustration. Some had tried to maintain contact, but were rebuffed by Jennifer and Sarah. The loss of all 6 children represented the erasure of an entire generation of the family. No recent updates beyond periodic retrospective coverage have emerged about the case. From a cliff in California to a more recent tragedy in Florida, these cases share a common thread of hidden darkness. Michael Wayne Jones, Jr. In September 2019, deputies responding to a car crash in Marion County, Florida, discovered far more than a traffic accident. Inside and around the vehicle, they found the bodies of Michael Wayne Jones Jr.'s wife, Casey, and their 4 children. Jones himself had been driving when the crash occurred. What had led to this horrific discovery? On September 15, 2019, Jones crashed his vehicle on Interstate 75. When deputies approached to assist, they noticed an overwhelming odor. Investigation revealed bodies had been concealed in the vehicle for an extended period. The state of decomposition indicated the family members had been deceased for some time before the crash. Jones confessed to taking his family's lives during questioning. He provided details about the sequence of events leading to their ends. According to his statement, he had used different methods for different family members. The children died from a combination of techniques including drowning and strangulation. Casey died from bludgeoning. During interviews, Jones complained about constant nagging from his wife regarding household and parenting responsibilities. He characterized his actions as responses to stress. Mental health evaluations found issues but deemed him competent to stand trial. Investigation revealed Jones had kept the bodies in the family home for weeks after taking their lives. Neighbors had noticed the family's absence but assumed they had traveled. The smell from the residence eventually became noticeable, but no one reported it before Jones left with the bodies in his vehicle. Jones's background showed a difficult upbringing. He had experienced instability during developmental years. Mental health professionals noted untreated issues that may have contributed to his inability to cope. However, these factors did not constitute a legal defense. The forensic investigation determined approximate timelines based on decomposition. The acts appeared to have occurred over several days. This suggested premeditation rather than a single breakdown. Jones had continued living in the house before eventually deciding to transport them. Jones pleaded guilty to all charges in court, avoiding a trial. The plea agreement included prosecutors not seeking maximum penalties for all charges, though serious consequences remained. He received death sentences for the children's cases and life imprisonment for Casey's. While his conviction was upheld, Florida's 2023 to 2024 death penalty statute change, allowing 8-4 jury recommendations, faced a legal challenge in his case. However, because his original jury was unanimous in recommending death for the children, his status remains unchanged, and he is currently incarcerated at Union Correctional Institution as of 2026. Casey's family released statements describing her as a devoted mother who worked to provide stability for her children. They expressed incomprehension at Jones's characterization of ordinary family life as unbearable stress. The Marion County community held memorials for the family, and established funds to support similar families facing crisis. Some tragedies defy explanation, even after extensive investigation, as the next case would prove. Rachel Henry. In January 2020, Phoenix police responded to a welfare check at a residence where they would discover 3 young victims. Rachel Henry, 22 years old, had taken the lives of her 3 children. The children ranged in age from an infant to a preschooler. What could drive someone to target those most dependent on them? On January 20th, 2020, officers found the bodies inside the Phoenix home. Henry confessed to taking their lives through smothering. She remained at the scene when police arrived, showing no attempt to flee or conceal what had occurred. Her demeanor during the initial encounter struck officers as detached from the gravity of the situation. The investigation struggled to establish a clear motive. Henry provided explanations during questioning, but these failed to clarify why she had acted. Psychologists who evaluated her found no clear psychiatric break or delusional thinking that would explain the acts. She understood the nature and consequences of what she had done. Mental health experts examining similar cases noted that substances or undiagnosed conditions sometimes play roles, though establishing clear causation remains challenging. In Henry's case, no definitive diagnosis emerged that would constitute a legal defense. The examination of her mental state found someone who knew right from wrong, but had chosen a horrific course. Limited information emerged about Henry's background before the tragedy. She was a young mother navigating parenthood with minimal apparent support systems. Whether she experienced postpartum conditions or other health challenges remained unclear. The lack of previous concerning incidents meant no warning signs had been documented by social services or medical providers. The forensic examination determined the sequence and timing of events. The acts appeared deliberate rather than impulsive, with time passing between each one. This suggested ongoing decision-making rather than a momentary loss of control. The methodical nature made the case even more difficult for investigators and prosecutors to comprehend. Rachel Henry actually pleaded guilty in 2022. However, due to several mental health competency reviews, her final sentencing was reaffirmed in 2024, where the judge noted the unspeakable cruelty of her singing a lullaby to the children while smothering. The court sentenced her to 3 consecutive life sentences, ensuring she would never be released. She currently serves her sentence in an Arizona state prison facility. The Phoenix community struggled to process the tragedy. Neighbors described the family as quiet, with no obvious signs of crisis. The absence of clear warning signs made prevention impossible in this instance. Victim advocates emphasized that most parents facing overwhelming stress do not harm their children, making prediction difficult. The case contributed to broader discussions about maternal mental health support and recognition of crisis situations. However, experts acknowledge that some tragedies occur without predictable patterns or preventable circumstances. The randomness made the loss even harder for extended family members to accept. Yet not all such cases result in prison sentences, as the final case would demonstrate. Deirdre Morley. In January 2020, Dublin, Ireland, became the scene of a tragedy that would test the boundaries of criminal responsibility and mental health defenses. Deirdre Morley, a nurse and mother, took the lives of her 3 children at their home in Newcastle. Unlike other cases where perpetrators faced life sentences, Morley's trial would end with a verdict that sparked intense debate. How did the court reach such a different conclusion? On January 24, 2020, Morley's husband returned home to find their children deceased. Morley had used suffocation to end their lives earlier that day. She remained in the house, having made no attempt to hide what had occurred. Her husband immediately contacted emergency services, beginning a response that would involve police, mental health professionals, and eventually the courts. The investigation focused heavily on Morley's mental state leading up to and during the acts. Medical records revealed she had been suffering from severe depression with psychotic features. Mental health professionals who had treated her documented concerning thought patterns in the months before the tragedy. She had expressed delusional beliefs about her children being damaged, facing irreparable harm. During psychiatric evaluation, Morley explained that she believed ending the children's lives was necessary to prevent greater suffering. Her reasoning reflected psychotic thinking, disconnected from reality. The delusions had taken hold gradually, with her mental deterioration accelerating in the weeks before January 24th. The trial centered on whether Morley understood her actions at the time. The defense presented psychiatric testimony, arguing her mental illness had disconnected her from reality. Multiple experts testified she had been experiencing a psychotic episode preventing criminal intent. The prosecution acknowledged Morley's mental health issues, but argued she retained sufficient understanding to be held criminally responsible. They pointed to planning elements and the methodical nature of the acts. The legal debate focused on the precise moment when mental illness crosses from diminished responsibility to complete absence of criminal capacity. The jury ultimately found Morley not guilty by reason of insanity, a verdict that generated significant public discussion. The finding meant she would be committed to a mental health facility rather than prison. The court accepted that her psychotic depression had rendered her unable to form criminal intent at the time of the acts. Following the verdict, Morley was placed in the Central Mental Hospital in Dublin. Her commitment was indefinite, with periodic reviews determining if she posed continued danger. Treatment focused on managing her psychiatric conditions and ensuring she could never repeat such acts. In late 2024, the High Court ruled in favor of the children's father, Andrew McGinley, allowing for a full public inquest that will examine the failures of the HSE, Health Service Executive, to inform him of the severity of Deirdre's psychiatric decline prior to the murders. This was all from our side today. Thanks for watching. Click here to check out another video.